I think we all know the expression, or at least have heard it somewhere. If you make a plan, God laughs. And I would like to think that St. Martha, whose memorial we celebrate today, is the patron saint of that expression. Now you may remember that Martha, Mary, and Lazarus were siblings. Lazarus was the one that Jesus raised from the dead. And because of that, the religious officials at the time began to set into motion the activity to have Jesus killed. Martha and Mary, being sisters, one would like to think that they would be similar, but they were at opposite ends of the spectrum. Mary was someone who was quiet, prayerful, attentive, contemplative. Martha, on the other hand, was a planner, an organizer, a doer, a mover and shaker. She was the one who had to have things just right. And there are two very marvelous stories about Martha in the Gospels. And at Mass, we have the option of reading one or the other today. And it's kind of a shame because both stories really are ones that we need to hear because they speak to us not just of Martha's character, but also a little of ours as well. The first one comes to us from the Gospel of Luke. Now, it's a story of just the way we act at home. You see, Martha, Mary, and Lazarus lived not too far outside of Jerusalem. And so most likely when Jesus was visiting Jerusalem, he would stop and pay a visit, maybe even stay overnight. Well, on one occasion, Jesus dropped in to say hello. Now, from the story, it sounds almost as if this was something that they hadn't planned. But nonetheless, they're very gracious. They welcome him in anyway. They have him come in, sit in the living room, probably a nice big easy chair. Mary chooses to sit at his feet and just to listen to what he has to say. Listen to his teaching about the kingdom. Listen to his teaching about his heavenly Father. Listen to his teaching about God's immense love for all of us. Martha, on the other hand, being the planner, being the organizer, wants to make sure that hospitality is taken care of right. So she goes right away into the kitchen. And there she starts to get a meal ready. But as she's preparing, something begins to eat at her. Because she's working really hard. She's getting everything ready. Chopping things up, pulling things out, mixing things. But she recognizes that she's doing this by herself. Mary's in the living room with Jesus. And so the more she's making a meal, you can only imagine the more frustrated and aggravated she's getting. So cupboard doors are starting to slam back and forth. Pots and pans are banging around. So she gets to the point where she comes charging out of the kitchen up to Jesus and says, Jesus, I'm in the kitchen working really hard. And my sister is sitting here at your feet. Tell her to come in and help me. Jesus says to her, Martha, Martha, calm down. It's okay. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her. How often are we the ones who want to have a plan, who want to organize, and get upset with the Lord when things don't work out our way, when other people don't want to cooperate with our plan because we know what the right thing is to do? How dare they not think that I'm on the right track? How dare they not follow what I have to say? Whose plan is it really? Whose plan are we working for? Or the other story in the gospel comes to us from Matthew. And it's a story that occurs 4 days after Lazarus has died. And Jesus comes into town to pay his respects. Word gets to Martha and Mary that Jesus is nearby. Mary sits at home and waits for Jesus to invite her, to summon her. Martha, on the other hand, takes the bull by the horns and goes out and charges up to Jesus and says, "Master, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died." Jesus says to her, "Your brother will rise." She says, "I know that he'll rise. He'll rise in the resurrection on the last day." But Jesus says to her, "I am the resurrection and the life." How often do we get disappointed when things don't work out our way? So we want to tell the Lord, first off, that he was wrong, and second off, what the right way should be. Do we ever stop and think that, maybe it's possible that the Lord could be right? Are we willing to allow the Lord space for his plan to work out? God's plan is bigger than we could ever imagine. God even takes our plans that seem to go awry and uses them as a part of the fulfillment of his plan. God asks us to use what he's given to us, the skills, talents, and abilities, and to use them wisely. But first he asks us to open up our heart, open up our mind, open up our conscience to hear his voice, to hear, as only he can tell us, what he wants of us, how best he can use us. The Lord's plan is so broad, so immense, that it encompasses everything we ever possibly could imagine and so much more. All the Lord's asking of us today is to trust him, to trust that he has our best interest at heart, to trust that he cares so much about us, to trust that he loves us, and that everything he does works for that. God bless.